like you. Love is the reason for everything you do. Your kingdom's high, but it's not far. We live our lives to tell the world how great you are. Shout your name, God, God, reign. Through this and every age, your love remains the same. You reign. Who could we ever compare to you? Kings and queens bow down in all of what you do. Nations of the earth, they rise and fall, but your throne is seated high above them all. God, God, reign. We sing your praises and we shout your name. Every age, your love remains the same. You reign. You are greater than we'll ever know. Still, you're closer than a friend. We have seen, so let the record show that your goodness knows no borders, that your kindness knows no end. God, God, reign. We sing your praises and we shout your name. God, God, reign. Through this and every age, your love remains the same. God, God, reign. We sing your praises and we shout your name. Write my story and call it good, and I can't imagine a greater truth. Oh, it's like you. You know what I'm thinking before I ask. You're in my future, you're in my past. It's hard to imagine the way you move. Ooh, it's like you. You give my eyes the light to see. You give my lips the words to speak. You give my lungs the air to breathe. You are my everything. You give my soul a song to sing. God, so grateful that you never give up on us, and that you fill our hearts and our minds with goodness, God. And we thank you that you have been so very good to us. Tonight we want to rest. We want to rest in the knowledge that you have been and that you will be good. He only looks on me with pride, always so kind to me. He says I'm perfect in his eyes. Why should I ever doubt it? He won't ever change his mind. You're only ever good, only ever good, only ever good to me. You're only ever good, only ever good, only ever good to me. That's all you've ever been. That's all you're gonna be. Only ever good, only ever good, only ever good to me. I am my Father's dream. He only sees me with delight. My innocence redeemed, my reputation reconciled. I'm the prize of his suffering, bought me with the blood of Christ. Oh, only ever good. You're only ever good, only ever good. You're only ever good to me. You're only ever good, only ever good, only ever good to me. That's all you've ever been. That's all you're gonna be. Only ever good, only ever good, only ever good to me. Only ever good, only ever good, only ever good to me. Only ever good, only ever good, only ever good to me. That's all you've ever been. That's all you're gonna be. Only ever good to me. Good to me. It's your nature, you can't help it. What could stop oh, your goodness? Since forever you've been like this. What could stop oh, your goodness? It's your nature, you can't help it. What could stop oh, your goodness? Since forever you've been like this. What could stop you're good to me. You're good to me. You're good to me. Good to me. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running out, it's running after me. Your goodness is running out, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now, give you everything. Your goodness is running out, it's running after me. Sing that together, come on. Your goodness is running out, it's running after me. Your goodness is running out, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now, give you everything. Your goodness is running out, it's running after me. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God.
So I don't know about you, but I really value times like this. Times where we get to worship together. Here at Terra Nova is that we'd like to remind ourselves is that worship is one of the things that God uses to align us with reality. And that's really important in our world where we've got things like virtual reality and augmented reality. But tonight what we've done is just entered into God's presence and aligned ourselves in the things that are actually really true and are real. And not only that, but together today is that we get to bring our real selves to the real God. And that's what we get to do. And that we're trusting that as we do, is that God is going to be good to us, He's going to be gentle to us, He's going to be truthful to us, and He is going to have us leave changed because we've had an encounter with Him. And so I'm so glad that you came to Terra Nova to gather with us here today. My name is Lyle, and it's just great to be with you. And before you have a seat, I've got a question for you, and the question is this. Do you have a favorite pastime or hobby? Okay, I bet you got one, right? Okay, so can you think of one? By the way, if you don't have one, I've got dozens of them. You can go ahead and borrow one of mine, but I bet you've got one. So what I'd love to have you do is to turn to a person next to you, find out their name, and find out the answer that they would give to that question. Okay, ready? Go for it. But again, just wanted to welcome you all to Terra Nova, and just thanks so much for coming. It's just really great to be together. And I got to say that if you're here and you're new, you're our guest. We just wanted to say, man, thank you so much for coming. It just means so much to have you here with us together on Saturday night. It's great to be at church together on Saturday night. It's one of the things that we love here at Terra Nova is the opportunity to come and do that. And so many of us come on Saturdays, and then we've got Sunday to actually kind of rest and work on some of those pastimes, I suppose. So anyway, good on you for coming to Terra Nova, and it's great. Now, what I've been tasked to do is to walk you through what you got in here, and it's the weekend program, so I want you to go ahead and pull it out and open it up. And as you do, what I'd encourage you to do is to go ahead and start us off together. Let's do that on the back with this perforated draft card called the Connect card. And so what I'm doing here is folding this in half, and you can do it as well, and tearing this out, and then begin to fill this out. Starting with your name and then moving on from there, because here's the thing is we'd really love to hear from everybody, whether you're here and you're a guest or you've been here multiple times. We just love to hear from everybody. By the way, if you're our guest, we just want to encourage you just to give us as much information as you feel comfortable with, and just and please just know, trust us, is that we will be gentle and kind with your information. Okay, so trust us, we'll be good with it. And then once you've got some of that stuff in play, you can begin to take a look at some of the different things that you can go ahead and check in terms of boxes. You've got a big space to write prayer requests or just updates and such. Many of you use that space, and that's fantastic. And so we just see the value of us connecting, being a relationally strong church, because each of us contribute to that by filling out the Connect card when we gather. And so spend some time working on that, and that'd be great. We'll get that from you towards the end of our time. And then now, while that's free, you can go and open it up and explore the program. You can read about things that we have coming up, like Serve Day at the Abbey. You can sign up for that. And we've also got Man Camp coming up as well. So for your guys, Man Camp, you want to go ahead and check out Man Camp. But as you do that, I got to tell you, that from time to time, is the people that come to Terra Nova and they maybe sticking around, for a few weeks or a few months, oftentimes come up with this question. The question is, hey, so like, what's this church all about? Where are you going? What's important to you? What's your deal? And the best way that I can answer that is, hey, you got a couple hours because it's going to take some explaining. And so what we do here at Terra Nova is we do a great Sunday after lunch event called Terra Nova Tours, and you've got a flyer that tells you a little bit about that. And it's just our opportunity, John and myself and some other leaders, to just walk everybody through just what Terra Nova is all about. It's just like how, where we came from, what's important to us, where we feel like God's leading us, how it is that you can get deeper into the life of Terra Nova and make this a great experience for you. We even talk about an opportunity to become a member of Terra Nova and much, much more. And we get to do it around the context of having a really nice lunch together. So it's this really kind of fun relational time. There's a lot of Q&A and a lot of dialogue back and forth. And so people through the years really value going to the tour. And we just feel like the tour is really, really helpful for anybody that's new to Terra Nova or is learning about Terra Nova, or maybe you've been around Terra Nova for a long time and you've just never gotten around to it, is the tour is for you. So we've got one coming up here in a couple of weeks. And so what I'd love to have you do is that if you're interested in the tour, to go ahead and write Tour Me on your Connect card, and then we'll be getting in contact with you. That'll give us the high sign that you're interested, and we'll be reaching out to you this week to give you more information about the tour. We're just really looking forward to having a whole bunch of people on the tour. I know that again and again, we do this about 4 or 5 times a year, and it always is really the highlight of the season for us to have this time together. It just allows us to kind of work in a way that's just a little bit different than the ways in which we work when we're here in the services on the weekend. So hope to see you guys that haven't gone on the tour yet to jump on in, and we'll see you at the Terra Nova tour. All right. Well, again, just wanted to thank you guys so much for coming. Really excited that you're here, because we are in the middle of a series that I believe is just really so impactful and practical, but then also just soaked in the Word of God. And so let's go ahead and step in to part 4 of the reality of life.
Well, hey, how you guys doing? Great to have you here on a Saturday night. Thanks for watching. If you're online, we are part 4 of the series called Reality of Life, which I've been enjoying because it gives us an excuse to talk about some things that we might not always have an excuse to talk about that I think are really essential to having a well-lived life, particularly as viewed from the end of one's life, to look back upon one's life and feel like I've had a well-lived life. And these are things that are really essential to that are frankly, often very much the opposite of the game of life, and very much the opposite of many of the things that we hear, the messages we receive from the world around us. And so, like we've been talking about things like in week 1, how in real life, very much contrary to the game of life, it is actually deep relationships. And there's so much research on this from the social and medical fields that is deep relationships, vital, healthy, close, long-lasting relationships, which really are the primary avenues of meaning, of growth, and of lasting happiness, a well-lived life. And then in week 2, we talked about the win of life, and we said, actually, the win of life, contrary to what you might assume, is not getting more and more in this life for myself, but it's actually giving more and more of myself away. And we talked about this line from Jesus that if you're always trying to save your life and have more for your life, you will lose your life. But if you lose your life for my sake, Jesus said, you will find life. And that the win of this life isn't actually something that happens in this life, but it's something that happens after this life, as we stand before the one who gave us this life and give an account to everything we did with what he gave us. And if that's really the win, if I'm looking forward to that moment and seeing the rest of my life through that lens, well, that changes everything about what I do with pretty much everything, including that 50% of my life that I spend in some way related to work. And vocation. And so we talked about this last week, how work is really designed by God for us to bring the image of God in us to the world around us, adding value and contributing to others through the way that he's shaped our lives or the way he's shaped us personally, and how often though work feels like it's just a futile, like a waste in this world, that we aren't actually living for that win. And we aren't actually working for that win either. We're working for something more than this world, and we're working for something more than just an earthly boss. We're working for someone more than that. And that win really defines what we do with this big area of our life called work. Now today, part 4, we're talking about time, the time of our lives. And in the game of life, you probably know this, really the only currency is your money. That's the only thing of value that you have. It's all you have. It's all that counts. And of course, in the game of life, money is how you decide who wins. It's how you define success. But in real life, it's your time that's actually the most important currency that you have. In real life, the time of your life actually is your life. That is your life. In real life, it's the time of our life that's the most important currency, and it is limited. It is limited. Now, here's something that's interesting. In our culture, we're always conscious of what time it is, right? What time is it? What time is it? We have our cell phones that we're constantly looking at, watches, if anybody still wears a watch, clocks on the wall, clocks on your computer, notifications that hit you throughout the day, just reminding you of the time. And in our culture, the most frequently asked question with regards to time is, what time is it? What time is it? What time is it? What time is it? Even while you're sitting here, as you've been here today, you might have already checked at a couple points to see, like, what time is it? What time is it? And every once in a while, isn't it true? Every once in a while, we kind of lose ourselves in something where like maybe it's a video game we're playing, or it's a hobby that we do, one of our favorite things to do, or maybe it's a novel that we're reading, or gardening or something, and we kind of lose ourselves in that activity. And then we say, what do we say? I just lost track of time. I just lost track of time. And then you ever have this sense like you're coming out of that, and just in the moment that you're coming out of it and you realize that you lost track of time, there's this panic that sets in, like, what time is it? You ever ask that question? Like, wait a minute, what time is it? But very quickly we get back on track. We get back aligned with what time it is and back on focus. Like that's kind of the rhythm of our lives. The problem is with asking that question is that that's not actually the most important question to ask with regards to the time. A better question, and I think you would agree with this, a better question than what time is it is, what am I doing with my time? What am I doing with my time. See, the problem with always checking the time, always looking at my cell phone, dozens and dozens of times, sometimes unconsciously, I'll sometimes do it and go, I just looked at that. It's not even a minute later than the last time I looked. And one of the problems with this constant reminder of what time is it, is that it's a constant reminder of the thing that's really the most depressing thing about your time, and that is it's running out. It's flying by, it's running out. And you think about it, we have calendars to tell us how fast the weeks and the months and the years go by. We have clocks that tell us how fast the minutes and the hours and even the seconds go by. Like you really need to see your life tick away like that. And then isn't it true, the older that you get, the faster it goes? That really is true. Like life really is like a roll of toilet paper. The closer you get to the end, the faster it goes. And there's something to that. And it's like when you were a kid, Christmas never got here. Now it's like every time you turn around, it's Christmas. It's Christmas. It's Christmas again. I haven't even used the gift cards I got last year. And it's like time just goes by so fast. And one of the worst things about constantly asking, what time is it, is that it's a constant reminder that time just goes by so quickly and it is limited. A better question than what time is it is, what am I doing with my time? What am I doing with my time? And maybe, just maybe, I should begin living my life and spending my time, because your time is your life, with the end in mind. Maybe I should begin spending the time of my life with the when in mind. And that's a big idea. Right? That's a big idea. It's probably an idea that not many people, maybe no one in this room, would actually argue with or disagree with. And to get some help on this big idea, I want to look to a guy that we might all be familiar with. It's very likely you've heard of this person before. His name is Moses. He's rather famous, 3,500 years after he lived, pretty well known. And we're going to look at a psalm. It's Psalm 90 that tradition tells us was actually written by Moses 3,500 years ago. Now, just a side note, in a couple of weeks, in 2 weeks, we're doing this new series called Disappointed. I'm excited for this, praying through the Psalms of Lament. And the Psalms are this collection of poetry and songs and prayer that have been used by God's people for millennia, individually and collectively, to help them lean into God, to help them deepen their relationship with God. And the greatest percentage of the Psalms, and there's a collection called the Book of Psalms, there's 150 of them in the middle of the Hebrew Scriptures. The greatest percentage of them, roughly 2/3 of them, are called Psalms of Lament. Now, you know what it means to lament. It's to grieve, to cry out. And these are songs and prayers and poetry that's designed to help facilitate us bringing our disappointment and our grief and our pain and our struggle and our confusion and even our doubt to God, rather than allowing those to drive us away from God, to wrestle with God through the real stuff that we feel sometimes. And this psalm we're going to look at, Psalm 90, is actually part lament, and it's partly what's known as a psalm of trust and partly a psalm of wisdom. And Moses in this psalm gives us some wisdom. He gives us a much bigger context and a much bigger framework for understanding the brevity of our lives. There's this sense of smallness in the psalm. There's this sense of humility, but there's also a profound perspective. And here's how the psalm begins. It's so beautiful. It begins like this. Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Like you are the context in which every generation has lived, that we all lived. We have lived our brief lives in you. You are our dwelling place. And then he says, this is really beautiful. Before the mountains were born, it's such a great turn of phrase. Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. From everlasting to everlasting. And Moses says, those are the bookends of our lives. Those are the bookends of our brief lives, not our birth date and our death date, but there's everlasting to everlasting, and there's God. And then there's my life. And then he says this is a great line. You turn people back to dust. And this is like for me, this is like the Lord of the Rings Gandalf moment in the psalm, like, you shall not pass. He says, like, you turn people back to dust, saying, return to dust, you mortals. Kind of a cool line, right? Kind of a cool line. In other words, like, no matter how rich or cool or accomplished or cute or big stuff or important you think you, by the way, I'm Moses, no matter how important or famous you think you are, at the end of it all, you're mortal. And God says, okay, time to return to dust now. Oh, that's humbling. That's humbling. Then he says this, 1,000 years in your sight is like a day. 1,000 years. Think about this, a millennium. 1,000 years ago, not 1900s, 1800s, 1,000 years ago, we were in the middle of the Middle Ages, right? This was 1,000 years ago was before the Crusades. 1,000 years, you think of the last 1,000 years. And how much history, the 1100s, 1200s, 13, 15, 16, 17, 18, 1900s, how much history has passed under the bridge? How many human lives have come and gone in 1,000 years? 1,000 years is like a day that's actually already gone by. It's already just a memory. It's like you ever have this great day, this big day you're building up to, you're looking forward to, and then the day's over and you're thinking back on the day, it's like, wow, all of that hoopla, it's just a memory now. Now all that is 1,000 years is like a day that's now just a memory, or like a watch in the night. Now a watch in the night is a military term. It's roughly 4 hours. That 1,000 years is like this 4-hour span, and I'm out in the middle of the night and I'm all alone and I'm watching it. It feels like it's a long time. It feels like an eternity. And then it's 4 hours and it's 1,000 years. Now don't do the math. Like, okay, so if 1,000 years is 4 hours, then my lifetime, because that'll just be depressing. But here's this point. You need to see your life in a very different kind of perspective. And then he says this, you sweep people away in the sleep of death. Or another way to translate that Hebrew phrase is you sweep people away like a dream, and it's just like it's gone. They are like the new morning grass in the morning, like new grass in the morning in a desert climate. It springs up in the cool of the morning, in the dew, the fresh dew that's fallen. It's flourishing. It looks amazing by the end of the day. Dry and withered. Moses is like, hey, that's us. That's us. Like we sprout up. It's like we're here. We're flourishing. Oh, you're so pretty. You're gone. Like, wait, what? Now, like, thank you, Moses. Like, do not invite this guy to your birthday party, right? He is not coming to my 30th or my 40th. Like, that is not the stuff I need to hear. But here's what we're going to see. Moses' point is not, your life doesn't matter. Your life is just that. It doesn't, that's not his point. His point is not, so who cares? Or, it's over before it starts. Just surrender to fate. His point in part is our lives are so brief that it's futile to try to create something meaningful with our own lives, with our own little lives on our own for ourselves, because the truth is we are not that big and we are not that special and we do not have that much time. If we think we're it, if we think we are the point of our lives, we are missing the point of our lives. And if you're living your life thinking that you can keep that from happening to you, that will never happen, or trying to live as if it won't happen to you, you are in denial. And worse, you're actually missing an incredible opportunity. Now, at this point in the psalm, the tone of the psalm shifts into lament. And we're going to skip a little bit, but as you read it yourself, as you soak in it maybe this week, you'll see that there's this expression, and we can imagine a few points in Moses' journey along the way and their journey as a community where he might pour out this angst to God and wrestle with God over the things that he writes in this psalm. And you read these lines, and like, man, he is troubled right now. They are in trouble right now, and they are just pouring that out to God and questioning God with that. And then he says this, verse 10, our days, this is just so like now, right now, real life, they may come to 70 years, or hey, maybe 80 if our strength endures. If you're healthy, maybe 80. Yet the best of them are but trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass and we fly away. In other words, even if you have a good life, even the best of those years, the best of those days, there's trouble, isn't there? There's loss, there's disappointment, there's grief, and it doesn't mean God's not there. And it doesn't mean he doesn't care and that he doesn't love you. It doesn't mean he's not paying attention. And it does not mean that he's not up to something eternal and something good, but it's just all so brief that we don't always get to see it ourselves. And then he ends this major part of this section of the psalm with a prayer. And this prayer is really the centerpiece of the psalm, the hinge of the psalm. And the prayer goes like this: so teach us to number our days. Teach us, God, teach us to live as if our days are numbered, and to live with this constant, even daily sense of the days that we have and the days that remain, to live with the end of our days in mind, because our days are numbered, they are limited, and they are coming to an end. Now, numbering our days is something we've all done before. This is something everybody has done. If you've ever had final exams, oh boy, how many days do I have left to study? If you've ever had a huge deal going through or a project you needed to finish, it's like, okay, when is that due? How many days do we have left? If you've ever been a kid waiting for Christmas, you know what it means to number the days, right? And if you've ever been a parent who has to get stuff for their kids at Christmas, it's like, how many days do we have left? How many shopping days? You are numbering the days. If you've ever gotten married, you might have numbered those days. I do a lot of premarital counseling when we marry people, and I've noticed there's differences in personality, but more than half the young couples I marry, as it's getting close, I go, how many days you have left? They can just tell you, 63. 17, yeah, it's getting close. They just know the days, right? They're numbering their days. If you ever had a baby, right, you had a due date. My oldest daughter is about to have her first baby. It was due yesterday. Nothing happening right now, which would be expected, but she has been counting the days, and you might expect her to be counting the days for the last handful of months. We know, you've numbered your days before. You've numbered your days. You had an important day coming. There's a limited number of days to get ready, and there are things that need to be done to prepare for that day, and so you know what it means to be numbering your days. And Moses says, hey, we may not know the day of our death, but we know that our lives are brief. They are like the morning grass. They are over before you know it. So teach us. With that in mind, teach us, Heavenly Father, to live as if our days are numbered, to count our days and to treat them the same way, so that, and this is a great line, and here's the result, here's the outcome of knowing how to number of days or being taught that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Teach us to number our days so that we may gain a heart of wisdom. In other words, if we learn to live our lives with the end in mind, with the knowledge of the brevity of our lives and the number of our days, within the context of, Heavenly Father, the brevity of my life and the eternality of yours. The brevity of my days and the eternality of your days, if we will learn to live within a context of brevity and eternity, we will become wiser, deeper people with wiser, deeper care. I will make better decisions. I will make wiser decisions. I will make better financial decisions. I will make better relationship decisions. I'll make better parenting decisions. I'll make better recreational decisions, better professional decisions, better time decisions, and I will gain a heart of wisdom. And then he ends the psalm this way with one more prayer. The psalm ends with this line: may the favor of our Lord, the Lord our God, rest on us. It could be translated, may the beauty, the pleasantness of the Lord our God just rest on us. Establish the work of our hands for us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. In other words, given the brevity of our lives are too small a thing to be significant in and of themselves. Our lives are too small of a thing to be the goal of our own lives, the reason for our own lives. But if our actions are actions that are actually established by you, and if then you come and empower and establish our actions, the work of our hands, well, then there just might be some significance that comes out of the brevity of this life. So instead of just asking, what time is it? I want to ask a better question with regard to time, a better question than that. In light of the brevity of my life and the fleeting nature of so many things that I might pursue, and in light of eternity, Father, show me what to do Show me what to do with the time of my life, with the limited days I have. Here's a way you might summarize this idea, this big idea, that remembering our time is limited provides us with wisdom to know how to spend our limited time. Well, that remembering that our time is limited actually provides us with some wisdom, some perspective to know how to spend our limited time. Now, that's not a depressing idea. At least it's not supposed to be. It doesn't need to be, and it isn't intended to be a depressing idea. And if you think that way, if you think that's depressing, then you will run away from the reality of the fact that your days are numbered, and you will run away from the wisdom to be gained from that perspective. But if you and I will embrace that fact that God has given you a limited number of days in this life, and you don't know how many those days are, and that He has given them to you for a reason, and that the reason is not you, or at least it's not just you, then this can leave you with a wiser, deeper heart. Now, with the time that we have left, because it is a limited amount of time, and you might already be checking to see how much time we have left, I want to shift the focus to some practical application of this big idea of this principle. And it comes from a process that I actually worked through when I was 30 years old. I was somewhat newly married a few years, and we had just had our first child, and I got my master's degree, and I was starting to work at a church, and so my life was becoming a little bit more adult-like, and I walked through this exercise. We've talked about it a little before. It's called the funeral exercise, which doesn't sound very positive, but it's actually incredibly profound. It changed me, and the next 30 years of my life, this idea of living with this sense of the number of my days and with the end in mind. But first, before we jump on that, a couple of quick observations, a couple important observations. The first observation is this: there are multiple dimensions of our lives. This is actually part of the problem. There are multiple, diverse facets and spheres of our lives that are often pulling us in a lot of different directions. Isn't that true? And in each one of those dimensions or facets of our lives, there are things that are important. They're actually really important, things that we need to do, things that I should do. Within each dimension, we have what I would call, and you might not like this word, so you can use a different word if you want, essential responsibilities. They're things that, in other words, in each dimension of my life, there are things that actually matter. They really, really matter, not just in this life, but at the end of this life. These are things that are, you might say, they're going to be on the exam. You ever remember being in school and you ask, hey, so is this going to be on the exam, or are you just having fun talking about this for a while? Should I be taking this down? Do we need to know this? Is this important? And in each dimension of our lives, there are some things that are going to be on the exam. When I stand before the one who gave me my life to give an account of my life, there are going to be things that mattered and things that really didn't matter. There are essential responsibilities, and there seems to be just an endless number of opportunities, just endless number. These are things that aren't important, but they're optional, but maybe they're fun or they're good, or sometimes they feel obligatory or we can't say no, but we like them and we do them, and we often choose to do them over the things that are important. Isn't that true? I want to illustrate it like this. Now, this is not new. You may have seen this done before. But the illustration works like this. The jar is your time. This is the time of your life, and it is limited. It is finite. There are boundaries to this that aren't exceeded. And then there's all the pebbles. Now, the pebbles represent all the cool, fun stuff that we do that just sucks up, that fills up our time. So for some of us, half the pebbles in this jar are social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, scrolling through, LOL, laughter, thumbs up, hearts, and then there's texting, and gosh, YouTube and cat videos and and gaming like Candy Crush and Roblox and Fortnite. And then there's like movies and Netflix and HBO Max and Apple Plus and sports, watching sports, playing sports. There's golf and tennis and pickleball, right? And then there's kids sports and fantasy sports, fantasy basketball, fantasy football, fantasy baseball, fantasy tennis, fantasy hockey, fantasy life. So there's their fantasy life, and that can take up a whole lot of time as well. And then there's walking around Costco, and there's shopping online, and it's just endless. I mean, the number of things you can do to pass your time, to fill your time is endless. And some of that's fun. Some of it's good. Some of it's not really that good, and it can be unhealthy, but I think we would agree that all of it is really kind of optional. That's the stuff that's not gonna be on the exam, right? It's just stuff we like and stuff we choose. And then there are all the important things in life. So like there's, if you, like job, we talked about that last week, like 50% of my life is spent, somehow working or school. There's the school rock. And then, when I come home, there's like food prep and shopping and laundry and cleaning. Like somebody's got to do all of that. And then there's kids. There's the kid rock. The kid rock is a big rock. That's important. And then there's like if you're married, the spouse rock. I think you would say the spouse rock's probably or engaged or something. Spouse rock's a big rock. That's a big rock. You got to figure that one out. In fact, if you're sitting with your significant other right now, just turn to them right now and say, "Baby, you're my big rock." Baby, don't say that. That's corny. Don't do that. And then there's there's my health, and I need to get to the gym, or I need to take better care of myself, but I just don't ever seem to have the time. And gosh, my parents are aging, and now we have to care for them. But how will I fit all of how will I do that? And for a lot of us, this is your life. This is what life just kind of feels like, that there's not enough room in the jar. There's just not enough time in the day. There's not enough time in my life. And because of that, there are important areas of our lives that start to go unattended and neglected. And the thing is, we don't immediately feel the neglect, do we? We don't immediately feel the effect of the neglect, or we would change it very quickly, but it's over the long haul. You neglect one of these rocks long enough, and it costs you dearly. You neglect the health rock long enough, and it will cost you dearly. And by the way, it will cost the people who care about you and love you dearly as well. You neglect your marriage rock for the sake of the kids, like the kids. I mean, they just take up so much time. There's so much demand, so many options, so many things to do with the kids. And the kids come first, the kids come first. And if you tell yourself that, and then you tell yourself, my spouse can wait, yeah, they're a big rock, but in order to get everything in, they'll wait and they'll still be there. And here's what happens. I've seen it happen, and you've seen it happen too. And then after all those, like the years of grind, people look up for like 8, 10, 12 years later, and they realize that it couldn't handle the neglect. Their marriage couldn't sustain the neglect, and now they really have no marriage. And I end up taking away from my kids the best gift that I ever could have given them, but there just wasn't the time. I mean, there just wasn't the time in my life to get it all done. And here's the key. The key to spending my time wisely, the key to making the most of my days, the key to answering the question, what should I do with my time? The key to numbering my days and gaining wisdom when it comes to what I'm doing with my life is not adding more and more, faster. It's just time management. If you just multitask and if you just do enough in every sphere of life, then you will be able to get it all done. The key has nothing to do with that. The key to answering the question, what should I be doing with my time, is actually prioritizing my life. It's recognizing what the big rocks are to begin with. What actually are the most important things in my life? And then figuring out the way that I will put those big rocks in the jar first so that I can fulfill the essential responsibilities of my life. And so here's where I want to take us. It raises a question that I'm not sure you've ever thought of before. Or maybe you have, and maybe you've answered this, but perhaps you haven't. And the question is this: so then what are the most important responsibilities of my life? What are those? Like, what is that for me? What is that for you? And this is the question I thought through and worked through at about 30 years old. That if my time is limited, and there's so many pebbles, And if I don't realize that my days are numbered, I can spend all of my days on the pebbles and never get around to the big rocks because it's just not that important or that urgent. But when I realize that my days are numbered and I'm living with that end in mind, I begin to ask myself, so what needs to go in the jar first? What are those most important things? Now, I want to give you a little time to think about that. And if you want to tune me out and work on that yourself, like go for it, that's fine. But as you're thinking about it, I want to make a few suggestions as to what the big rocks of life just might be. And this is, especially if you're a follower of Jesus, God actually has a lot to say about the key dimensions of our lives and what is essential within each dimension. So, for example, the first big rock, as I did this exercise, this might surprise you, is self. That was the first one I wrote down. So I think you would agree it's a pretty important dimension of my life. And there are endless ways of spending time on me, time on myself, on me time. But not all of these endless options or opportunities will fulfill my essential responsibility when it comes to this area of my life, which I worded this way. Years ago, I worded it this way. Here's my responsibility in this area of my life: to be physically and emotionally and spiritually healthy and whole. That's what I want to be. Now, we just recently did a whole series on this in the month of June. We spent 4 weeks on this, but Jesus once put it this way, and he's quoting the most important line in the Hebrew scriptures, and he actually says it's the most important thing. He says, the most important commandment, the most important thing to get right is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God. And then he says this: with all of your heart, with all of your soul or your breath, your life, with all of your mind and with all of your strength. In other words, Jesus is saying the most important thing is like, oh, that must be a big rock. I should put that in the jar first, right? The most important thing to get right is to get an alignment of your whole self, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually aligned Godward in love. That is the most important thing to get right in life, recognizing that that rock right there will impact every other area and every other dimension of my life, that my impact will be determined by and often limited by this rock and by my capacity. And so the question I put on my, years ago, that I've had at the forefront of my mind in this category of my life for decades is this: is my personal capacity equal to the dream that God has for my life? And we talked about this a few weeks ago. Is my physical capacity equal to the dream God has for my life? Is my emotional and mental capacity, is my spiritual capacity equal to the dream or the calling that God has on my life? Or will I reach a point where my neglect of this area will become a limiting factor and a lid to what God can do through my life because I just don't have it? I'm not there anymore, and I'm responsible for this. No one else can do this for me. This is on me, and I believe when I stand before God, I will give an account for this core dimension of my life. This is on the exam. Now, if you're familiar with what Jesus says in this line, you might know that the very next thing he says, and oh, by the way, the second thing is to love your neighbor as yourself. In other words, get that love that you have aligned Godward. You take that and you build that capacity, and then you turn that out relationally. So that's where I went with my most important dimensions of life. So the second thing I wrote down, and you can visualize these, as I very much did, as these concentric circles emanating out from my own, personal, mental and emotional and spiritual and physical health. The second one was family. Family, and as I thought through how to word this, here's how I worded what I think is my essential responsibility: simply to love well those closest to me. To love well those closest to me. Now, this dimension of life is different for everybody, and it differs from season to season, doesn't it? It differs as seasons of your life change. It differs for you than it does for me as an individual. So I'll just give you how I thought through it. The first part I thought through is, okay, I'm a husband. That's part of this dimension of my life, and I am responsible to love my wife as Christ himself loves us. In fact, I got that line from a letter that the Apostle Paul wrote where he says this: husbands, and I'm like, hey, that's me. I'm a husband. What do you want to say to me? Oh yeah, love your wives. Love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. You love her sacrificially. Love, not love the noun and emotion. Love the verb and action. You love her. And I'm responsible for that. That's what I believe. I'm responsible to love my wife and to cultivate a great marriage. And then as I thought through this dimension of my life, I'm a parent. In fact, as I was doing this, I was a rather new parent. And a couple of lines later, the same letter, the same guy writes this, fathers. And I'm like, fathers, hey, I'm a father. He says, fathers, do not exasperate your children, which, just a moment of confession, is probably the verse in the Bible I have disobeyed the most. It's like, I know, but I keep doing it. Do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up and then I want us to all say this next word out loud. What is it? Training. Bring them up say it again, training. The training and instruction of the Lord. In other words, as a dad, I am responsible not to entertain my kids, but to train my kids. And then beyond that, it's like I have other responsibilities to my family of origin. And 30 years ago, both my parents are still alive and my siblings and such. And so I thought through, what does it mean for me to honor my mom and dad? So then I have to work through my family of origin issues, right? So that I can do that well, because that's on me. I'm responsible for that and to love and care for my siblings and support them. But all of this comes down, and this looks differently for you and it looks differently for me now. I'm responsible for this rock. I'm responsible for this area of my life. No one else is. And when I stand before God, I will give an account for what I did in this area of my life. Now, the third one I wrote down might surprise you a little bit, but it's incredibly core to me, and that is community. Community. And here's how I wrote this description: to know and be known, to love and be loved, to serve and be served in the context of a community of people. That this, at 30 years old, I was looking at what I wanted my life to look at from the view of the end of my life. And I realized that core to who God made us to be is this sense of our lives interconnected with others, where we are knowing and being known, loving and being loved, serving and being served, which meant to me, and I think it means for all of us, I need to set down some roots, because this is something that only happens over the long haul. I can't be like a hummingbird just kind of flitting from like flower to flower, experience to experience, the next thing. You will not know and be known, love and be loved, and serve and be served if you live like that, or if I live like that. Now, if I'm a follower of Jesus, and I consider myself to be a follower of Jesus, scriptures actually say I have a responsibility to this, a responsibility to this thing called church, to this community, this Jesus-following community called church, to connect, to be connected, and to be contributing mutually. In fact, the first followers of Jesus felt so strongly about this that the primary metaphor that they used to refer to it is a body. Now think about that for a second. Think about your own body and how incredibly connected it is and how mutually contributing it is. In fact, in one of the letters to the Christians in Rome, the Apostle Paul says this: since we are all one body. He's talking to a community of believers. He says, this is what we are. We are a single body in Christ. You can't get less American like this. This is like the most non-American line in all of the scriptures. We belong to each other. We belong to, I don't belong. We belong to each other. Each of us needs the other. And God designed our lives to be lived out, connected to other people, showing up in one another's lives, contributing everything we have for the good of others and not just for ourselves. And I am responsible for this. And no one will do this for me. And when I stand before God, I believe wholeheartedly, I will give an account for what I did with this dimension of my life. And then comes the fourth sphere that I wrote down, the fourth big rock, is work. And we talked about work extensively last week, and how I described it like years ago, thinking through this facet of my life, was to use my abilities and energy, use the image of God in me, right? To add value to the world around me and to provide not only for my needs, but for the needs of others. To create resources that take care of not only me and my family, that actually help bless other people beyond me. And we talked about this last week, how the work can sometimes feel futile. It's actually part of who God made us to be, that our work and what we do with our work and how we work really matters to God. And we looked at this line from another letter written by this same guy we've been quoting named Paul. And he writes this, we looked at this last week: whatever you do, not when you get your dream job, not when you're doing what fills you with significance. It's like whatever, like you're a janitor, you're like whatever you are. Yeah, hey, Work at that. Work at it with all your heart. Bring your whole heart to that as if you were working for the Lord himself, not another human being. And then he goes on to say, since we know we will receive an inheritance from the Lord as our reward, we are not working for a here and now win. We are working for an eternal win. And that just changes how we approach this dimension of my life and what I'm doing, how I'm adding value, what I'm bringing to this area of my life. It is the Lord Christ you are serving, he ends up saying, and I have the responsibility for that. Again, nobody can do that for me, and I shouldn't need someone looking over my shoulder every minute of the day, making sure I'm actually doing that. I have a responsibility to do my job, to do my work with excellence, with integrity, to add value, to be thoughtful with it as if I am working for Christ himself. And then came my fifth one, and I thought through this a lot. I spent weeks on this, not just a few minutes. The fifth one, as I edited through it, I said, this has to be in there. For it to be legit, for it to be real, as a follower of Jesus, the fifth dimension or the fifth rock is actually the world, as in the whole world, as in to care for this world and the people who occupy it with me. In fact, the most famous line in all of the Bible is John 3:16, where it says this, for God so loved the what? The world. Let's say that line together. For God so the world. For God so loved the whole world, like all 7 or 8 billion people in the world now, that he gave his one and only son for the world because he cares about it. And yes, the world is a broken and fallen and messed up place. And God has called me, and I believe God has called you to actually be part of the solution to what is broken and messed up in this world, to not just care about my own little bubble, to not just care about me and my 3, and I'm just taking care of my own, but to actually care about what he cares about, which is, oh, by the way, the world. And I have a responsibility for that. I have a responsibility to play my part in God's solution to the pain and brokenness and isolation of this fallen and fractured world, and to not get so distracted by it and put off by it that I lose grip of what I can bring to it. I need to, how am I doing this? How am I doing this? And I believe this. I will give an account to God someday for what I did. It's going to be on the final. It's going to be on the exam. What I did with those who needed that from me. In fact, I think it's this dimension of life, it's this final one, this fifth one, that gives focus and alignment to all of the others. That when we begin to see our lives through the lens of what God is doing, that arc of history from everlasting to everlasting, within that context, we discover purpose and significance that go far beyond the bookends of our birth date and our death date. 5 dimensions of life that I think are just core. These are 5 really big rocks, and you may parcel that up differently. Seriously, like you work on that, and it's like your season, your life, you're looking at your life, depending on that. But I think you need to figure those things out for you. There might be 7, there might be 8. But here's the thing. Once you start to figure that out, you have to get the big rocks in the jar first. And when we do, this is amazing. You may have seen this done before. When we do, watch this. So here it goes. Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Costco, YouTube, cat videos. Oh, share that with John. Thank you. Candy Crush, fantasy sports, sitting by the pool, reading a book. There we go. And then watch this. We're not done yet. With room to spare. Now, here's the thing. There will always be pebbles. And there's nothing wrong with pebbles. They will fill the gaps in our time. They will always be there. But here's the point. If you don't get the big rocks in first, you will never get them in. And when we do, we see God increase our capacity and use our lives, and we stand before the one who gave us life and just maybe hear those words that Jesus spoke. Well done, good and faithful servant. So with that end in mind, I just want to wrap up with 3 quick questions to ask yourself, to work through, and there's probably not enough time tonight, but maybe to take the next few weeks and answer these questions. The first one is this: what are the core dimensions of my life right now? What are they? I gave you my 5. You might like them. You might take all of that. You might just dice that up a completely different way. But I think you need to ask yourself, what are the big rocks that need to be in the jar? Like, what is that? And then, what are my essential responsibilities in each dimension? Like, what is important when it comes to the self rock? What is important when it comes to the kids? Or what is important when it comes to my work? Because it's not simply good enough to recognize that that area of my life is important. And it's not simply how much time can I pour into that area of my life. It's important to know what you're actually trying to do with what the essential responsibility is. And so here's how it works. I can spend lots of time on myself. I can spend days on myself. The options for self-entertainment are endless. But not all of those things will increase my capacity mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, will they? In fact, some of them might detract or deter from it. And if it doesn't, it's just pebbles. All of that was just pebbles. Or I can spend so much time on my kids, hours and hours and hours, being at all their side and entertaining them, giving them, like providing them with the latest gashes and driving them from here to here in the latest fashions. But if I'm not training them to be great adults, healthy, emotionally healthy, and spiritually healthy adults. And how many of you know it is possible to spend a lot of time on your kids and not do that? Because we have all seen people go, you were totally child-centered and your kids grew up terribly. It's possible to spend a lot of time on your kids and miss that essential responsibility. Isn't it? Isn't it? And I don't want that for you, and you don't want that for me. It's not enough to know that the area of life is important. It's like, so once I write that down, how will I capture this? How will I capture this? To love well those closest to me, or raise children who are emotionally and spiritually healthy adults. I'm not just raising kids, I'm raising adults. Like, how do you word that? And then the last question, so important, how do I get that rock in the jar? And how do I get the rock in the jar every single time? How am I going to arrange my life around prioritizing and fulfilling that essential responsibility? I am going to need what habits will I build? What relationships, what tribe do I need walking alongside with me to keep me focused on this? What commitments do I need to make in my life? And listen, habits and commitments are like auto pay. Like you set them in there, you put them on your calendar, and you just repeat them. And over time, they build this capacity, right? And so 30 years ago, I identified these 5 spheres, these 5 dimensions in my life. I wrote them down. It took some time in light of brevity and eternity. What are these key dimensions of my life? And then I wrote down a statement that would capture what I would like said to me about that area of my life to be true of me at the end of my life. That's the funeral exercise. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. And then I began to arrange certain habits and commitments. And I would do this, by the way, weekly. I would weekly sit down with that list of 5 and those description statements and my calendar. And you're like, oh, that is like just way too organized for me, bro. I am not that organized, and I'm not a good planner. Anybody who knows me well knows that is not my superpower. But this was so important to me. This vision I have of people who get to the end of their lives and major areas of their lives have just been dropped. And I just like, I don't want that, and I don't want it for you either. And so with that in mind, I just began to arrange, like, okay, when am I going to exercise? Date night with my wife, family nights, every Monday night, sacred. Until our kids recently left the house for years, just sacred. Nothing blocks that. One-on-one time with each of my kids. Man, I haven't done a daddy-daughter date in a while. When am I going to put that on my calendar? Oh, this week, but next week. And like a lunch with my son or a time out with my son, reading books, listening to podcasts, the first day of every week and the first minutes of every day devoted to God. I'm just going to put that rhythm in my life. That's just what I'm going to do. How will I get the big rocks in the jar first, and all of the fun stuff will follow? And it will. All of the fun stuff will follow. And I haven't been perfect, it's not been perfect, but those commitments and those habits and those rhythms, arranging my life around that over the years, over this long period of time, have kept the most important things front and center in my life. So what'll it be for you? What are those core dimensions of your life? What are you really responsible for? There's a lot of fun stuff that can be done in each one. What is your core responsibility or your essential responsibility? And then what habits and relationships and commitments will you bring into your life and around your life to help you put that in the jar first? Because in real life, It's our time that is our most important currency, and it is limited. And as you get a sense of that and you let that work its way into you, you will gain a heart of wisdom. So I want to end with a prayer. Just close with this prayer. I'm going to put it on the screen, and I want us to pray this prayer out loud together. Will you put that up on the screen? It is there, right? Yeah. The prayer just goes like this. Heavenly Father, teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom and fulfill your purpose for our lives. So here's what I'd like you to do. If you had stuff in your hands up till now, you've been checking the time, put that down for just a second. Maybe open your hands, and I want you to pray this prayer out loud with me. Will you do it? Heavenly Father, teach me to number my days, that I might gain a heart of wisdom and fulfill your purpose for my life. Let's say that again. Heavenly Father, teach me to number my days, that I may gain a heart of wisdom and fulfill your purpose for my life. With that, I just want to say, hey, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you got something out of this week. Love to talk with anybody more if you want to process that a little bit more. I hope you'll spend a little time working through that and thinking through that this week, and then join us again next week for part 5 of our series. As you're heading out, please don't forget about those Connect cards that Lyle was talking about. We'd love to hear from you, love to hear from everybody every week. It's a highlight. You can share this, by the way, if you're thinking of somebody who's like, hey, I want to pass this on at youtube.com, our Terra Nova. Again, the Connect cards, you can throw those in the offering basket, and then you can throw these giving envelopes in there as well as giving online and on the app. And then finally, one last thing, don't forget to bring somebody back with you next week, because it is the series finale of The Reality of Life, and I'm really excited about what we're talking about next week. So I hope you come back and join us for that one as well. God bless you guys. Have a fantastic week. May the Lord teach you to number your days so that you will gain a heart of wisdom. We'll see you back next weekend.